Our next group of lipids, prostaglandins. Well, prostaglandins, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I'm going to get lazy because I don't want to write you over and over. So we abbreviate prostaglandins as PG. Who said that this was rocket science? That will make sense. PG, prostaglandin. And there's different types of prostaglandins. We have a PGA, PGB, PGC, PGD, PGE, PGF, PGH. You get the picture, right? So we abbreviate prostaglandins with a PG, and then after the PG will come another letter. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and so on. And this letter will designate really what type of prostaglandin that we have, because they will come to us in slightly different forms depending on the functional groups that they have on them. We will also see numbers in PGs. So it's not uncommon to see something like PGE1 and PGE2. We'll talk about why the numbers are there. And we will also see things like alpha and beta incorporated into this abbreviation, and we will talk about what the alpha and the beta represent. You need to go back and take a look at maybe some of the sugars because we used alpha and beta during that time. So will that be similar? We'll see. So what's so special about prostaglandins before we even take a look at the structure for a prostaglandin? So first off, we need to talk about what a prostaglandin does. Prostaglandins are very important, and that's because they deal a lot with inflammation. So, if I cut myself, or if I hurt myself, and my little toe swells up, or my pinky begins to swell, this is due to inflammation. And it's prostaglandins that causes some of this inflammation. Well, if I take a look at blood pressure is also helped regulated by prostaglandins. Very important. I don't want my blood pressure to skyrocket because I'm going to give myself a heart attack. So, I want to make sure that I'm kind of calm before I grade those horrible lab books. Then at the same time, I want to make my blood pressure a little high, but I don't want it too low. So if it's too low, then I don't have the energy to grade those lab books, right? So I gotta be somewhere in between, very carefully laid out and regulated. Prostaglandins also have something else to do in the blood, and this is blood clotting. So if I cut myself, the reason that I don't continue to bleed is because my body sends out a response, and this response basically sends little bitty molecules out that serve as glue to patch up the dam. And this is patching up the cut that I'm receiving so that way I don't continue to bleed. So blood clotting is very important. I want my blood to clot when it can. At the same time, though, I don't want to overregulate that, because if my blood clots too well, then you can kind of see the problems. I don't need a cut for it to clot. It will clot without a cut, and then I will get stopped up arteries because of it. So this is something that I want to stay away from if it gets out of control. Fever. Well, fever is your body's way of basically fighting off an infection, and fever is very good. If you get a fever, that means that your body is working the way that it's supposed to work. So fever is good when it comes to fighting an infection. You should have one. Pain. Well, if I cut myself, if I slam something down on my finger, I'm probably going to say, ouch! So if I do say ouch, this is pain. It makes it hurt, right? And this feeling is kind of coming from prostaglandins. Well, if I go into labor, and hopefully I will never go into labor. If I do, then we've got a problem. But for you women out there that do go into labor, you get a very high spike of prostaglandins that get released. And this really takes control of the process of the labor movement. And everything from your breathing to your pain that comes from labor. I know that these men don't appreciate what you go through when you do decide to have a baby, but these prostaglandins know what you've got to go through. So they're your friend. Anytime you go into labor, you're going to see a very high spike of prostaglandins because of it. And they also control what we call the sleep wake cycle. So basically, what that means is that I go to sleep and I wake back up. So, this sleep wake cycle that we experience every day, every night, maybe for some of us during the day, maybe for some of us during lecture and other courses, not for Chemtech courses, but in other courses, you would see that. And maybe your sleep wake cycle that you go through when you watch one of these videos. I hope not. I hope that you're paying attention when you watch them, but these sleep wake cycles are also controlled by prostaglandins. So we see really everything under the moon controlled by some form of prostaglandin, or prostaglandin is involved in some form, in some fashion. Um, uh, Throughout our entire bodies in multiple different scenarios. So what do these prostaglandins look like? Let's take a look at what this structure begins to take on. First off, we have a five-membered ring that kind of heads off the prostaglandin. So your first job is to draw the cyclopentane ring. And the cyclopentane ring up here at the top is traditionally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 carbons, and I'm just going to draw this as a carbon because this has a functional group of COOH. So we see a carboxylic acid that's there on a 7 carbon chain. So this is the way this prostaglandin is made. Almost for all of these prostaglandins, if it does get modified, it will be modified only slightly. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. It's traditionally 7 carbons and traditionally all single bonds. We do see some variations of that, not many, but 7 carbons, all single bonds for the most part. There's always exceptions, right? And then down here at the other end, this one, we're going to see another carbon chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So this is going to be 8 carbons in total. So what I'm going to do up here to the side, just so that we can keep that in mind, is that this is made up of 7 carbons and this is made up of 8 carbons. And we have this cyclopentane as a head of the molecule. Now take a look at this structure. This is lipid in its prime. We see all hydrocarbon, really. It's all hydrogen and all carbon. We don't really see that many polar groups. We see a polar group here with the COOH. It's slightly acidic, so we do see some polarity and some charge that's associated with that functional group. But everywhere else, it's traditionally nonpolar in character. It's very hydrophobic. It's very fat soluble. And because of that, we classify this thing as a lipid. This is what we call the PG skeleton. So the PG skeleton is going to be this guy. And we will modify this skeleton, add things on, change things up just a little bit to give us these different variations of PG molecules. And that's something that we will talk about because, you know, some of these molecules are very important in the job that they do. And we want to take a look at what functional groups are going to change these things up on us a little bit. So 7 carbon and 8 carbon, that's what we are after. We call the group of PG molecules PGX, and X represents anything. All right, so this could be the template for A, for B, for C, whatever the case is. But PGX is kind of the common terminology or abbreviation that we give to a prostaglandin. So X designates the functional groups basically. And off of this, we can have PGAs, we can have PGBs, we can have PGCs. And we're going to group these three together because PGA, PGB, and PGC all contain a carbonyl group and a double bond. So I'm going to group all three of these together, and we're going to say this contains a carbonyl and it also contains a double bond as far as the structure goes. Now, where this position's at, that's the different story. So they can be changed, but this is what they have in common: A, B's, and C's. Carbonyl group and a double bond. The location of the double bond determines whether this is an A, B, or C. So when we begin to look at that, we'll see that A, B's, and C's are different in the double bond location. And we'll make sure that that will come across very clearly, because that is what's going to distinguish between these three molecules. PGDs and PGEs. So PGD and PGE, they don't really have a carbonyl and a double bond. The PGDs and E's have what we call beta hydroxy ketones. So beta hydroxy ketones, this is something that you should already pick up very quickly because we talked about this type of terminology last semester. Beta means kind of alpha beta carbon, right? Alpha carbon, beta carbon. I should be able to pick out the beta carbon. Hydroxy is going to represent the OH group, so hopefully I didn't have to say that, but just in case, hydroxy is OH. And of course ketone, hopefully I don't have to say that either, but ketone is this carbonyl that's sandwiched in between two carbons. So PGD and PGE, that's the group that we will see that will tag along with it: beta hydroxys and ketones. And then finally PGFs, right? A, B, C, D, E, F. PGFs are what we call 1,3-diols. And 1,3-diols, di means two, all means OH. So again, hopefully I don't have to spell that out for you, but that means two OH groups. That kind of thing you should already know. Okay, so PGA, B, C, D, E, and F. We're going to stop at that letter. We'll incorporate one more, but that's it, and we won't do it in this video, we'll do it in the next. But these are your variations, 6 variations that you will see with prostaglandins. And in the next video, we'll take a look at A, B, C, D, E, and F, and we'll begin to look at what makes them different and what is their role and their job function when it concerns these types of molecules. So stay tuned. We are not finished with prostaglandins yet. We're just simply running out of time on this video. And keep in mind, prostaglandins, they do quite a number of things. So you want to make sure that they're happy, and you want to make sure that they're working properly. If not, and you turn your back on them, they can land you in the hospital, and who wants that? So you always should look over your shoulder, because who knows what that prostaglandin is thinking. It could come for you at any time.